Hello Year 8 and welcome back to this science lesson about the big topic, where do we come from? And today is a lesson 5. So let's start the lesson with the driving question. Remember to copy the driving question and then underneath the driving question in your exercise book, so we can then start the lesson. And underneath the driving question you will find the keywords that we're going to use today during the lesson. So today's driving question is, why do I have dimples when my parents didn't? So let's start refreshing what we said last lesson when we were talking about biological gender. We said that we have two different kinds of biological gender, the female one and the male one, and we said that the gender is set by a specific pairs of our chromosomes, and this pairs is the 23rd, in fact, and if your biological gender is a male one, you will have on your 23rd pairs of chromosome XY as chromosomes. Instead, if your biological gender is female, on your 23rd pairs of chromosome, you will have XX, because what we said is that between a male and female you will have 22 pairs of chromosomes that they will be identical. The only one that will be different is the pair 23, and this pair is also called a pair with sex chromosome, because they are the chromosome that they will determine the gender. And if your biological gender is the male gender, have X and Y. Instead, if your biological gender is female, you will have XX. Okay, so if these two parents, a female parents and a male parents, will have a child, if they had a baby, the probability of a boy and girl would be 50%. How can we find out? So how can we say that if two parents will have a child, the probability to have a boy or a girl is 50%? So to find the probability of getting a boy or a girl, you can draw a genetic diagram. Okay, this type of genetic diagram is called Punnett square, and it is the one that I've just put here on the side. Okay, so this is called Punnett square. Genetic diagrams are just models, so we need to remember that they are just models. They are used to show all the possible genetic outcomes when you cross together different genes. Put the possible gametes to start. You need to put the possible gametes. So gametes is another word to say sex cells. And in human beings, we know that male sex cells are sperm cells. Instead, in female, we have X cells. Okay, so put the possible gametes from one parent down the side and those from the other parents along the top. So in this case, I put on the top the female gametes, on the side the male gametes. Then in each middle square, you fill in the letter from the top and the side that line up with the square. The pairs of letters in the middle show the possible combination of gametes. Okay, so you need to cross each top gamete with the side gamete. So you will have, in this case, for this one, you will have 2X. Okay, so this child will have as gender a female gender, biological gender as a female gender. Then in this case, instead, you have an X and Y, so the gender will be male. Then again an XX and again an XY. So in this case, as you can observe, you will have a 50% chance to have a female, a 50% chance to have male. So there are two XX results and two XY results. So there is the same probability of getting a boy or a girl. Okay. So now we are going to focus a little bit more about inherited characteristic. And last lesson we were talking about inheritance, and we said that inheritance is all the features, all the characteristics that you can inherit from your parents. And we said that these characteristics are passed through genes. And we said that genes is a section of DNA that is in charge to control a specific characteristic. Okay, so for this reason, what genes you inherit control what characteristic you will develop, okay? And also we said that all genes can have alternative forms, and these alternative forms are called alleles, okay? And because we have in our somatic cells 23 pairs of chromosomes, it means that because we have chromosomes in pairs, it means that for each gene you will have 2 alleles, one from your dad and one from your mom. Okay, so this means that for every gene in our chromosome, we will have 2 alleles because we have chromosomes in pairs. Okay, and one came from your dad, one came from your mom. Okay. And this is what we just said. And those are some examples of characteristics that you can inherit from your parents. For example, the hair color, the eye color, the skin color, shape of earlobe, or cheek dimples, to refer to the driving question. Okay, so this is the first task for you guys. So please pause the video, go through the option. You need to tell me which statement is true and pick one. Okay, let's have a look to the right answer. So which statement is true? And the right answer is B. So genes are a section of DNA. Different forms of genes are called alleles. Okay, let's move on. We said that for each gene we have 2 alleles because we have pairs of chromosomes. And one allele came from your dad, one allele came from your mom. The alleles can be defined in 2 ways. In fact, we have dominant allele, where the dominant allele is the one that controls the characteristic whenever it is present, and it is indicated as with a capital letter because allele normally are indicated with letters. Okay, in fact, you can have allele because we said that for each genes you will have 2 alleles, so in pairs. So you can have pairs with both capital letters, or a pair with a capital letter and a lowercase. This is because the lowercase is related with the recessive allele, where alleles characteristic only show up when it present on both chromosomes. Okay, so in this case you can have just one kind of pairs of alleles, that is in this case with double lowercase letter. Okay, and as I said, the dominant one is the one that will control the characteristic whenever it is present. In fact, in this case you can see that you will have one dominant and one recessive. In this case, the characteristic that will show up will be the one linked with the dominant one, because the dominant allele overrules the recessive one if they are both present. Okay, so in this case, you will have that the dominant allele will always overrules the recessive one. In fact, in this case, um, when the recessive allele will show up to characteristic, you have that both the latter are in lowercase. Okay, you need to have both the recessive allele to show up the characteristic link with the recessive characteristic. So an example could be, for example, dimples, to refer to the driving question. So you have that the genotype is the kind of alleles that you can have. Instead, the phenotype is the appearance. And in this case, you have these different kinds of genotype. So in this case, you have a both with the dominant allele, these 2 with one dominant and one recessive, and this one with 2 recessive. So dimples is a characteristic that is linked with a dominant allele. So this means that because dominant is the one that will show up the characteristic whenever it is present, you will have that between these 4 genotypes, the first 3 will show dimples because you have at least one dominant allele that is linked with dimples. Instead, the 4th one will be the phenotype without dimples because you have the 2 recessive allele. Okay, so you will have the first 3 cases with dimples because you have at least one dominant allele. This one, when you have no dominant allele, so no dimples, because you have the 2 recessive, they are not linked with dimples. Okay, so we can find out the probability to have dimples in offspring using the alleles, the gametes from parents, using the system of Punnett square that we use at the beginning of the lesson. So in this case, you can have 2 different parents, and one is with both dominant, so it means that we'll have dimples. One is without dimples because it has both recessive allele. So when you are crossing the gametes, you will have that all the possibility of the probability to have that all the squares will have at least one dominant allele. So it means that the probability to have a child with between these two parents to have a child with dimples is 100%. Instead, if you observe two parents without dimples and with both recessive alleles, you will have that the probability the chance to have a child with dimples in this case would be 0%, because as you can see, all the square you have always two recessive alleles. Instead, if you have two parents in this way, so both parents will present dimples because they have one one dominant and one recessive, so the dominant will overrule the recessive, so you will have dimples. In this case, when you are crossing your leaves, you will have the chance, the probability to have a child with dimples will be 75%. And if you look at this kind of parents, so one with no dimples, one with dimples but with just one dominant allele, when you are crossing the gametes, you will have that the probability to have a child with dimples will be 50%. Okay? Then let's have a look to another kind of characteristic that you can inherit from your parents. For example, albinism. This one is a kind of characteristic that you can inherit by is a link with a recessive allele. It means that to show up the albinism, you need to have both the recessive your allele. They need to be both of them recessive. Okay, so in this case, you have two parents with one dominant that is not linked with albinism and one recessive that is linked with albinism. But because they have the dominant linked with not linked with albinism, the dominant overrules to the recessive. So it means that these two parents, they both don't have albinism. So what could be the percentage, what would be the probability between these two parents to have a child with albinism? When you complete the Punnett square, you will see that the probability to have a child with albinism is 25% because just one square has both alleles the recessive. Okay. And the other example could be earwax that can be wet or dry. So the wet one is linked with a dominant allele. The dry one instead is linked with a recessive allele. So when you have two parents, for example, one with the wet one with both dominant allele, the one with the two recessive allele link with the dry earwax, when you are crossing the gametes, you will have that the percentage to have the probability to have a child with wet earwax is 100%. Instead, the probability to have a child with dry earwax will be 0%. Okay? Now, there's another task for you guys. Please tell me which statement is a false. Go through them, go to the four options and pick one. Pause the video to go through the four options and tell me which one is a false. Okay, it's time to check the answer, and the statement that is a false is a D, because I said you need one recessive allele to show up the future, and the answer is false because you need two recessive allele to show up the future. Okay? Now, as a normal science lesson, there's a writing phase. I prepared for you 4 different questions, and for the first 2, actually, in the next slide, I can show you. So you will have started sentences, so that could help you to complete the task. For the third one, what you need to do, you need to follow the instruction, and you need to build a Punnett square. Actually, I've done it for you. So you have the Punnett square. I already put the gametes on the top on the side. What you need to do is to complete the Punnett square and to predict the future of the children. And in this case, we are talking about polydactyly. If when you have 6 fingers, that is a link with a dominant allele. Then for the fourth one instead, you need to do the Punnett square. This time I haven't done it for you. You need to do on your own. You need to build the Punnett square, complete the Punnett square, and then you need also to calculate the probability of a cat inheriting black 4. Okay? So pause the video, please. Take your time to complete the task, and later we can check your answers. Okay? Great, it's time now to mark your answers, so your work. So get ready with a green pen or different color pen, please. And for the first one, please describe, so the answer was describe the meaning of gene and allele. So a gene is a small section of DNA found on chromosomes, and allele is one of the different forms of gene. And explain the meaning of dominant allele and recessive allele. A dominant allele is the one that will always show up the characteristic. It will overrule the recessive one. This is the way that you can indicate it. Recessive allele is the one that will need both its alleles to display the characteristic, and you are going to indicate it with both letters in lowercase. Then, the Punnett square completed is in this way, so you will have 50% of children of the offspring with the probability of 50% to have 6 fingers and 50% with 5 fingers. And last one is that this is the Punnett square that you need to complete, and the chance to have a black cat is 100%. Okay, please pause the video if you need time to check your answers. And the very last thing is about the plenary. So today I've achieved, describe, explain, use, and combine. Please use what you've done on your own or not in green pen. Because I could, you can use these sentences, these statements to help yourself and explain why. And please pause the video if you need time to copy them. And the very last thing that I want to remind you is please don't forget to do the 10-question quiz on Show My Homeworks related to this lesson. Thanks for today. Well done, and see you next one.